Yesterday, the UK government killed one of the most technically illiterate proposals to come out of Westminster in years: age gating VPNs. 6 words from the online safety minister did it. We decided not to limit VPNs. If you're a regular here, you know this channel is usually doom and gloom, so it's nice to actually tell you about a bad idea dying for once. Here's how it happened and why you shouldn't get too comfortable. Let's start where I always start with this stuff, with the part of the argument that's actually reasonable. The UK government wants under 16s off social media, or at least meaningfully restricted from parts of it that are causing documented harm. That's the substance behind the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill, and it sits on top of the Online Safety Act's broader age verification regime, which has been forcing ID checks on adult sites and increasingly on general platforms like Reddit and X since last July. I want to be upfront about this every time because it matters. Nobody sensible is arguing children should have unrestricted access to adult sites, or that platforms should have zero duty of care to minors. Ofcom's numbers on this aren't nothing. The pressure on this government to be seen doing something is real, and to some extent deserved. The problem was never the goal, it's the mechanism. Every single time, and this time the mechanism was VPNs. Here's the logic that got us here, and you can already see where it breaks. Age verification went live under the Online Safety Act. Almost immediately, VPN downloads spiked. Proton alone reported an increase north of 1800% in days after enforcement began. Suddenly, a UK teenager with a free VPN app could reroute their traffic through a Dutch or Canadian server, and the age gate simply never appeared, because as far as the site was concerned, they weren't in the UK anymore. To a regulator, that looks like a hole in the fence. So the House of Lords voted 207 to 159, mostly along party lines, to amend the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill with what became known as Child VPN Prohibition. The idea was straightforward. On paper, any VPN service offered to UK users would need to apply the same age checks as the platforms it was being used to route around. If that sounds like a technical nightmare to you, you're already ahead of most of the people who voted for it. Think about what a VPN actually is for a second. It's an encrypted tunnel between your device and a server. That's it. That's the whole product. The entire value proposition, the reason privacy advocates, journalists, domestic abuse survivors, and frankly, most security literate adults in this country use one, is that the VPN provider knows as little about you as possible. You connect, your traffic is encrypted, and ideally the provider isn't sitting on a pile of identity data that becomes a target the moment someone breaches them. Now bolt an age verification requirement onto that. You've just forced every VPN provider serving the UK to either collect government ID from every single user or build some kind of identity layer sitting on top of the one product whose entire reason for existing is having no identity layer. You haven't closed the loophole, you've just forced millions of privacy-conscious adults to hand over a passport scan to use a tool that exists specifically so they don't have to hand over a passport scan to anyone else. The Age Verification Providers Association, and I want to flag that these people whose literal business model is age verification, not some fringe privacy lobby, came up with a name for the flawed reasoning behind all of this. They called it the VPN Fallacy. The mistaken belief that because VPNs exist, any age verification system is automatically pointless, and therefore VPNs themselves need to be brought inside the regime. Even the people who sell age-gating technology for a living were telling the Lords that this didn't add up. What followed was one of the more interesting alignments I've watched in this space. VPN companies, who have an obvious commercial interest here, let's not pretend otherwise, ended up on the same side as digital rights groups, cybersecurity researchers, and a chunk of the open source community, all publishing the same warning through slightly different channels. An open letter, individual statements, technical breakdowns. The framing that stuck was blunt. One line during the rounds described it as a security disaster waiting to happen. That's not hyperbole, and here's the part I think actually got through to the government more than any other privacy argument did. Centralising age and identity data with VPN providers doesn't just weaken privacy, it builds a single, extremely attractive breach target. You'd be asking companies whose entire product is minimising what they know about you to instead start hoarding exactly the kind of data that makes a company a target. Government ID documents, tied to browsing habits, tied to a UK IP. If you wanted to design the worst possible honeypot for state level or a criminal attacker, you'd struggle to do much better. And there's a second, quieter argument that I think mattered just as much, even if it got less coverage. The policy wouldn't have even worked on its own terms. A child determined to bypass age checks doesn't need a mainstream UK-facing VPN provider that's bound by UK laws. They need any of hundreds of VPN services, browser extensions, or even free proxy tools operating from outside the UK jurisdiction entirely, completely untouched by Ofcom guidance document. You'd have built an entire compliance and surveillance apparatus that inconvenienced law-abiding UK VPN providers and their adult customers while doing essentially nothing to the actual target audience, because the actual target audience was never going to use the compliant option in the first place. That's the reoccurring pattern with this entire regulatory era. And if you've watched my other videos on this series, you'll recognise it instantly. Build a wall that people you're worried about can walk around in 5 minutes while everyone else has to climb over it. So yesterday, it ended. Sort of. Online Safety Minister Kanishka Narayan went on BBC Breakfast and said plainly, "We decided not to limit VPNs." Technology Secretary Liz Kendall followed up with a written parliamentary statement putting the reasoning on the record. VPNs have privacy and security uses, and the government isn't going to age gate or restrict them as part of enforcing social media rules. I want to sit with that phrase for a second, because it's doing a lot more work than it looks like. Legitimate privacy and security uses. Is government conceding, in writing, the exact argument the industry and privacy groups have been making for months? Not "we found a better technical solution", not "Ofcom will handle it differently", just "you were right. This tool has real purpose. We're not touching it." That's a genuine win. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, and I'm not going to bury it under so much caveat that it stops feeling like one. Coordinated pushback from an industry, backed by clear technical argument, changed a piece of legislation that had already cleared a vote in the House of Lords. That doesn't happen often, and it's worth acknowledging when it does. But, and you knew there was one coming, because there's always a but with this stuff, let's be precise about what's actually changed yesterday, because it's narrower than the headlines suggest. The government has scrapped the VPN age gating provision. It has not scrapped the Online Safety Act. It has not scrapped the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill's under 16 social media restrictions. It has not addressed the repeal petition sitting at over 550,000 signatures, which the government has repeatedly said it has no intention of acting on. The broader architecture, mandatory ID checks, biometric facial scans, credit card verification for a widening list of platforms, is still very much intact and still expanding. What died yesterday was one amendment, arguably the single worst design piece of the architecture, but one piece. And here's the thing that actually worries me more than the amendment itself. The instinct behind it hasn't gone anywhere. The Lords didn't propose age-gating VPNs because they hate privacy. They proposed it because the underlying regulatory model, verify age at the platform, blocked by geography and identity, runs headfirst into a tool that is specifically designed to be exactly that model. VPNs aren't a bug in the system, they're a structural counter to it. And as long as the government's approach to child safety online is gate the platform, check the ID, VPNs will keep being the obvious pressure release valve, and someone in Westminster will keep eyeing them as the next loophole to close. We've seen this exact instinct surface elsewhere. India has been weighing stricter VPN regulation for the same reason. Bypassing internet blocks generally, not even age-specific. Malaysia has been cracking down on VPN misuse. Russia only backed off her VPN tax after technical delays and backlash of its own. None of those are the UK, and none of those are directly comparable regimes, but they are telling you the underlying temptation isn't unique to one minister or one bill. When you build enforcement around geography and identity, VPNs are always going to look like the loophole in the wall, and somewhere, someone is always going to propose patching it by regulating the wall climbers instead of admitting the wall doesn't work. So my honest read on yesterday, this is a real win, delivered by real pressure, and it should absolutely be recognised as one. It's not the end of the fight, it's the government backing off the most obviously broken part of a much larger project that isn't going anywhere. If you're relieved today, that's fair. If you're already bracing for round 2, that's also fair. And if the pattern of the last 18 months holds, you probably won't be waiting long. If you found this useful, this is genuinely the part where a subscribe actually matters to the channel. I've been tracking this exact fight, amendment by amendment, since before most outlets picked it up. And if you want to be here for round 2, whatever form it takes, that's the best way to make sure you see it. And if you want a deeper dive on how the age verification regime actually works technically, the ID checks, the biometric scanning, what data actually gets collected and by whom, I've got a full breakdown linked above in the description. Drop a comment too. Do you think this is the last we hear of VPN restrictions in this bill? Or is it just a pause? I read every one of them, and honestly, on this topic, I want to be wrong. So where does that leave us? A government that proposed regulating the tool built specifically to resist bad regulation got told by its own age verification industry that the plan didn't make sense technically, got hit with a coordinated warning from cybersecurity researchers that it would create a breach target instead of closing a loophole, and, for once, actually listened before the bill passed rather than after the damage was done. That's rare enough to be worth a video on its own. Just don't mistake one retreat for a ceasefire. The war over what the open internet is allowed to look like in this country is still very much being fought. This was just one battle where, for a change, the side arguing for an open internet actually won. See you in the next one.